So I really want to talk about what you really want to talk about. What? Electric power, educational assessments, some of the things that have been bugging me lately. Let me start with assessments, because I was talking about that over dinner, and I didn't really finish the conversation. I've become fascinated at age 66 with the modern ways that are available to us to assess and measure things that we couldn't measure 25 years ago, before computers. Now, one of those modes of assessment that has most interested me lately is something called the NWEA system of assessments and examinations for students. The kids call them the NWEs, and it stands for Northwestern Evaluation Associates. It's a consortium, nonprofit group of teachers and educators who produce and monitor and sell a comprehensive assessment system for math, English, and science. And it works, some of you may be familiar with it. You sit in front of a child, a student, second-year algebra student. Here it is, February 11, halfway through, maybe second-year algebra. The computer is told where the student is in the course of things, and it begins popping questions out. And if the student is getting the answers correctly, it scales up until the student is so challenged that he either breaks out in a cold sweat or he begins to get some of them wrong. And when the computer is satisfied, when the program is satisfied that it has tested adequately that band of skills relating to algebra 2, it moves on to another and moves on and on until at the end of 2 hours it has assessed very deeply that student's ability to manage over the subject matter, what that student can do and is able to perform. And if the student is having difficulty with the initial questions in each category, it scales down. And it catches the student at where the student's abilities lie and tests it there. So that when the smartest kid in the room comes out and says, I had an awful exam, I think I got a quarter of them wrong, he's comparing notes with the slowest student in the room who says, I didn't do so badly, I got about 3/4 of them right. But they took completely different assessments. And indeed, every student who takes it takes a completely different assessment. Even if you take it at 9 o'clock and take it again at 1 o'clock that afternoon, you too will get a completely different assessment, different question. Why? Because there are 5,000 or 6,000 questions in the database. And they are constantly, teachers from all over the United States are feeding questions into this database, and they're being evaluated, and the questions are being inserted into the exam. It's a constantly evolving assessment system. The neat thing about it is that you can give the student the test, the exam in September, give the exam again in January and again in June, and you can measure growth. And you can measure something more interesting, equally as interesting, and that is the value that is being delivered within the classroom. Particularly when you look at the situation where that assessment is given to all of the members of the class. The teacher instantly, almost instantly, has feedback from the assessment showing where the curriculum is making progress and where it's not, where there needs to be remedial work, who needs to receive it. It's a marvelously useful tool that teachers are using. And you can look at the whole school and compare how that school is adding value with its neighbors. And the neat thing is, it isn't measuring, it isn't the purpose of the exam necessarily to measure it isn't like the MEA exams and other standardized tests where everybody takes the same bubble test with a number 2 pencil, where if you're lucky enough to have been brought into this world as the son or daughter of a doctor living in Cape Elizabeth, you're probably going to do pretty well in the exam even if you're a fluff-off. It measures, because it measures over time, your progress and the value that's being added. It can measure something more important than just where you stand at any moment in time. It measures how your progress, the value, and the results, that are the benefits that you're receiving in that classroom. And then you can take this thing one scale further and understand that it is a very interesting way of evaluating teachers and understanding which teachers are delivering real value in the classroom and which ones are having trouble, and where teachers themselves need remedial work, need instruction, need improvement. If there's one theme to my campaign, and it's not one that sells very well, candidly, I'm a fan of assessment, and I think we're all on earth, we're all part of a society where assessment is crucial. And it's not confined to education by any means. You take a look at the social service agencies. We had an interesting letter the other day from Spurwink, which is one of the more aggressive, social service delivery agencies in the state of Maine. They provide help to badly damaged children. Children who are 8 years old, who've grown up in households where both parents are on drugs and they've been sexually abused since they were 3. And Spurwink says, we are a very expensive agency. We charge $100,000 to $150,000 for one of our beds for intensive treatment for these poor children. But the interesting thing about what we do is we think we're pretty good at it. And although it may cost $150,000 per bed, we don't keep those kids in those expensive beds very long. We're very good at moving them along, making real progress with those kids in a condensed and shortened way so that we get them into foster care, therapeutic foster care, at $30 or $40 a day very rapidly. And we're very unhappy. We're confused about why the state is proposing in its most recent budget to cut Medicaid reimbursement for those services by 10% across the board. What that means, that measure in the budget, in the governor's budget, is a confession that we have no way of discriminating between worthwhile agencies and those that are not performing as well. That we have no assessment system in place to understand which of the agencies deserve to be sustained and those that deserve to be cut back. And their plea to us is, if you knew what you were doing with your money, I don't know if this is true, they said, you would be investing it in us because we deliver value. And you can measure, and we can help you measure that value. We can help you measure the progress with which the progress that we make with these unfortunate kids, if you would be open to doing it. But it's difficult. The state just doesn't, it's troublesome for the state to get involved in that. But that's what the business of state government should be. I was asked 4 years ago, and I was the only Republican who went to the Maine State Employees Union policy meeting. There were 70-odd members showing up. And their last question to me was, well, how would life be different for state employees if you were elected governor? And I said, I think there would be fewer of you, and I think those that are left would be better paid. Why? Because I want managers in state government. Because most of the business of state government isn't done any longer by state employees. It is done by agencies that we contract with. The Department of Health and Human Services is sort of the Defense Department of state government. We have 7,000 open contract relationships, many of them with medical providers, but many of them with agencies like Sweetser and Sparrow. And so it behooves us to have systems in place and people in place who are capable of measuring things that were formerly regarded as subjective, but measuring these things and evaluating the delivery of those services in meaningful ways and translating money, delivering money and resources to those that prove themselves. That's the challenge of state government, and we don't do a good job of it. In fact, we're pretty much not doing the job.